بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى وبعد. My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would just like to sort of complete the discussion we've had over the last two sessions or so about the issue of Dawah. The last time we talked about doing Dawah, inviting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but with the use of wisdom. Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmah. With wisdom, being wise to the issues that people face, being wise to the challenges that people face, and ensuring that you don't say something that instead of bringing people closer to the Sunnah might result in them, for whatever reasons, going away from the Sunnah. Remember, although we may have good to give to someone, the method and the process we employ in communicating that good to the someone is extremely important, because it could either make that person open to what we have to offer them, or it could make them close. It could close their mind and their hearts to what we have to offer them. And the key is use an approach that will open the mind of the individual. And then of course, whether the person responds positively or negatively to the message, that's out of our hands. It's not our responsibility. But it is our responsibility to ensure that our method is correct. Not just that the message is good, but that the method we employ is also correct. Because if we don't, then we are guilty of not inviting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the proper manner. I mentioned the last time that it is amazing when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Musa and Harun alayhim as-salam to Fir'aun. And we all know who Fir'aun is. Allah did not instruct them to go and warn him about the fire and the serious punishment that he's going to be faced with in the hellfire, although we know that he will face these things. There's no doubt about that. But what is amazing is Allah said to them, فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. Right? This is the method, the approach, the manner, the process. So you have a good message, but the manner and the process in communicating the message is also important, because that method or that process would have a bearing on how receptive or non-receptive the individual is. So wisdom, the use of wisdom, being smart or diplomatic, as we say, in inviting someone to whatever message you want to give to them is important. In addition to that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَالْمَوْعِظَةِ الْحَسَنَةِ أُدْعُ إِلَى سَبِيلِ رَبِّكَ بِالْحِكْمَةِ وَالْمَوْعِظَةِ الْحَسَنَةِ. And with good admonition. Good admonition refers to the use of, for example, the stories of the former people, the previous nations and people who lived before, and the manner in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dealt with them after they disobeyed and they rebelled. Good admonition would also include the use of the many verses in the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the various scenes that will unfold on the Day of Judgment. It is almost as if we are looking into the future, if you like. This, inshallah, would also help to awaken the minds of people and to make sure that they have a very clear picture. Good admonition also would include the use of statistics, for example. Or perhaps in our days, these days, these researches that are done from time to time that highlight the wisdom in the legislation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us. I mean, as Muslims, we believe what Allah has given to us is the best. So we don't need scientific discoveries to convince us of that. But nevertheless, the discoveries can be used as good admonition. to show people that indeed, in the legislation that was prescribed and revealed more than 14 centuries ago, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned certain things. If you recall, some time ago we talked about alcohol and the serious danger that alcohol alone poses to human health. And only recently, the researchers and the scientists have actually discovered that even moderate drinking is quite dangerous. It used to be that moderate drinking was considered quite okay and actually beneficial to human health. Yet, the researchers have now discovered that that's not the case. Even moderate drinking is quite dangerous to the health of the individual. So these statistics and these kinds of discoveries are also part of al-maw'idat al-hasana, good admonitions. Because people can relate with these things. People can relate with these issues. And this is very important, because quite often if we can't relate to the issue or to the story, we tend to think that, we tend to feel detached from the story. We don't really grasp the message. It sounds as if it's just sort of a theoretical discussion. But for something to have an impact in our lives, we have to be able to relate with that. It has to touch our lives. And so these things and these statistics and these stories and researches that we read about from time to time, it does that for us. It makes us realize that these are things that we can relate with even as we live our lives today. We're not just talking about issues that were prevalent 1400 years ago or whatever, but they're very, very much relevant and they apply to us as well. And then Allah also says, وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. This is the third instruction in the ayah about how to go about inviting to Allah. Use wisdom, use good admonitions. So use whatever is in the world around you. And that's why it's also important for us as Muslims to be aware of what's happening in the world around us, so that we can relate with people based on these events and talk about these events and raise awareness. So we need to do this. We just can't say it's enough for me to pray my prayers and go home and that's it. We must be aware of what's happening around, because a lot of what's happening around, inshallah, can be used to our advantage in terms of inviting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is good admonition. And then the last thing Allah mentions is وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ, and argue with them or debate with them in a manner that is best. In a manner that is best. Now, people, when they usually debate, of course the goal is to win. Your goal is to win. Now, generally, when people debate, there are two ways or two avenues that people employ in order to win. Perhaps the best way to win any debate is to convince people that you have something good to offer them.